Good morning, everybody. Happy Father's Day. Fathers in the crowd. It's that time again. Welcome back. We're going to go over our summary from last time. So it was Exodus chapter 1, verse 17 through 2, verse 15. Until we get probably to about Exodus 5 or 6, we're averaging about a chapter a day, a week. So there's just a lot here. All right, so Exodus 1:17. Our title was from James. Thank you, James. The midwives feared God, and the Hebrews multiplied despite Pharaoh's efforts. Moses is spared and is raised by Pharaoh's daughter. Moses later fights evil and then flees to Midian. And the summary of the storyline we had was the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, feared God and allowed the boys to live. Moses went on a cruise in his own little ark. Moses is raised by Pharaoh's daughter, and his mom was his nurse. Moses murdered the Egyptian, killing the Hebrew. Moses speaks up to the Hebrew, who was oppressing his brother, and Moses flees to Midian and sits down by the well. So that was 2 weeks ago.
His childhood must have been really boring. They didn't give much information about it.
Say what?
So his childhood must have been really boring if they didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't give us much on Jesus either, though. So if you've ever seen the things that people made up about Jesus' childhood, it's fascinating. One time he brought a dead bird back to life, and all kinds of crazy stuff. All right, so that one's done. Now, last week we did Exodus 2:16 through 3:12. The title we got from James again, he pulled double duty this week, so was Moses saves Reuel's daughters and gets a wife from among them. God hears Israel's cries and calls Moses out of a burning bush, and that he will be used to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. So what happens starting Exodus 2:16 through 3:12? What's first?
Moses saves the daughters.
Moses saves the daughters of Reuel, Jethro, Reuel. Okay? Then what?
He marries Ziphrah.
Yes. Moses marries one of them.
And has
Zipporah. Zipporah apparently means little sparrow, little bird.
Then he has a son.
That's right. Then what?
God hears the cry of the people.
Yeah.
The king of Egypt died, and then God hears them.
Okay. What's next?
Just sees the burning bush.
Burning bush. We'll capitalize it.
He warns him to take off his sandals
Yes.
on the ground.
One. Moses.
He tells him it's the God of his father.
And the big one. What does he tell him he's got to do?
Bring the people out of
Yes.
Egypt.
Okay. Pretty good to me. What do you guys think? Yes. All right. That one's going in the can. We'll get to this one in just a second. So, jumping back in. Like my pretty picture I drew with AI. I did not hand it all that. I thought that was neat. So we missed a couple things at the beginning of when God speaks that I forgot to point out last time. First was, who is it that speaks to Moses out of the burning bush? Who is Moses talking to? So let's go back and look at that real quick before we jump back into this story. And so that was back in chapter 3, verse 2 of Exodus. Well, we went over this once, but I just want to make sure we point it out again, because I think most Christians, you ask who spoke to Moses out of the burning bush, they would say God. And so let's see. Verse 2, who is in the burning bush? It says, the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in the flame of fire in the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I'll turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, Elohim called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. So we have 3 total names for whatever the thing is that's in the bush. The angel of Yahweh, Yahweh, and Elohim.
Jesus.
Almost as if he's like 3 persons in one, or something like that. So there are 3 things in the bush that call out to him. In standard Christian interpretation, the angel of Yahweh is Jesus. It's Jesus in the bush that's speaking to him. But he's sitting here out in the middle of the wilderness looking at this bush with this little fire. And I want you to just contrast that to Moses' experience of Egyptian gods. For 40 years he lived in Egypt, where a god meant this massive ornate temple. Thousands of priests with perfectly pressed, uniforms and things, where they would have processionals to these gods all the time. There would be thousands of people with these huge ceremonies and rituals. And this God is out in the middle of the desert with the sheep by himself in a tiny little bush. Like, you could not have a greater contrast than the gods that he's used to in Egypt and the Elohim, the God that he's speaking to in this bush. And that may be why he feels a little more willing to be honest or familiar with God. He asks God a lot of questions. And something I don't think we fully appreciate is that there is no conversation like this recorded in any religion in the history of the world, where man questions a God, and the God does not kill him outright for it. In this story, Moses actually asks the questions you and I would all have had, and God gives him a patient, point-by-point answer to everything that he asks. And the only time he even gets angry at him is when he finally just says, I just don't want to do it. When he quits asking questions and he quits struggling and just says, I just don't want to. That does not exist anywhere else. Our God wants us to struggle with him. He wants us to question him. That's why he named his chosen people Struggle with God, Israel. And so we talked last time about the names of God. We're going to get the specific name of God here. We're going to learn a lot about it today. But to understand the names of God, we're going to need to understand a new word. So we've covered fractals, right? Is everybody pretty comfortable with fractals? We see fractals through the text now. There's a new word we're going to see through the entire text. It will help us understand God. And it is this word, polysemy. So poly means many. Semi is like semantic, like meaning. So it means many meaning. And we talked last time about the fact that there are words in ancient languages. Most of the words in ancient languages pulled double duty. They had multiple meanings to them, but the meanings were intertwined. You couldn't extract them. And in polysemy, you get these beautiful pictures like spirit and breath I talked about in ancient Greek. They're the same word. You can't extract the one from the other. You can't even formulate the idea in ancient Greek that your spirit and your breath are different. And so that helps you mine a lot of depth out of things that have to do with spirit and breath. It helps you understand the world because it groups these like things together. And so in polysemy, the words mean multiple things, and you can get these beautiful blended pictures. That's why you tend to use those kinds of words when you're writing poetry. What we have in modern languages is monosemy. We've tried to get specificity in our words. We've tried to make the word mean one thing so we can approximate the depth of meaning here. But what we gained in specificity, we lost in depth. And so we have to describe the words that we're reading here in the Bible, like God's name we're going to come to, by saying it means this, or this, or this, or this. And we have to try to lump all those concepts together in our head. But recognize that the ancients the concepts were all just flowing together like that. And so that's why we're going to get a ton of depth out of this. So we're going to see a lot of polysemy this week. There are just some intrinsic relationships that shouldn't be extracted. They shouldn't be unintertwined. All right, so starting back up at, so God's talking to Moses. We're starting at 13. Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and I say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'Well, what is his name?' What shall I say to them?" And God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey.'" So, I read that just in the exact translation we have. Now I'm going to go back and replace God's names with the words that are actually there. Okay, so the words that we're going to see. Eye, Asher, means I am what I am, or I am who I am. And Yahweh is his actual personal name that he says. And Elohim was that general term for spirit beings of which he is the foremost, like the Most High Elohim, right? So as we go through this text, back again, he says, God says to Moses, Eye, Asher, Eye, verse 14. And he says, "Say this to the people of Israel, Eye has sent me to you." God also said to Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever." So you see how it's a little different when we use the words than the word "the Lord"? I even tried to figure out this week why, if Yahweh is his name, why do we translate his name as the Lord? Why don't we just translate it as Lord in capital letters? Because it's his name. It's supposed to be who he is. So Moses' first question here, and the answer was it was just tradition. It was a tradition that grew out of the Orthodox Jews will not say the name of God. They won't say Yahweh or Jehovah. We actually don't know how to pronounce it because in the original Hebrew text there were no vowels. They saved a lot of writing by not putting vowels in any of the words. And so you could still read the words, but you didn't know what the vowels were. So that's why we say Jehovah or Yahweh, because these same four letters could either be pronounced Jehovah or pronounced Yahweh, or a few other ways. And so that's why we say it that way. If you remember the Masoretes back around 1000 AD that assembled the text we have today, that's the original Hebrew, they put the vowels back in. They're the ones that actually inserted all the vowels that gave us the definitive answer.
I had heard, and I don't remember where I heard it, but that the name Yahweh is actually like the sound of like breathing. Like when you breathe in and you breathe out, like he's the breath of our lungs in kind of sense. I don't know where I heard it from, but it was just kind of interesting.
So there is polysemy here. Yahweh actually, so as we get through this, I think you're going to understand it. So who, like, when I first learned this, who learned this, and your initial reaction is, what does that mean? Anybody? You're all liars. You're all liars. You heard God say, I am, in fact in the King James, I am that I am. What does that even mean, right? It's kind of funny though. So first, Moses' question, right? Moses' first question is, who am I? And his second question is, who are you? And he asked that because God's answer to the first question was, it doesn't matter who you are, Moses. I am Elohim, right? I'm God. And so he asked, well then who are you? And God's answer, strangely, is the words, who am I, just in a different order. I am who I am. It's all those same words. But Moses asks this sort of like, well, so I know who you are, like I know your name, but if they ask me, what should I tell them? Because I know, I totally know, but I'm just asking for a friend. Like if they ask, what do you want me to say? He doesn't even ask, just like, what is it? He has to ask as if, well, they're going to ask me this, and what do I say? But this moment, Moses asks this. This is one of the most consequential moments in the entire history of the universe, right? I feel like the rocks, the mountains, the animals, everything in creation is waiting breathlessly for God's answer, okay? Moses says, what is your name, or what do I call you? And they're like, what's he going to say? And he says, I am who I am. Now I want you to imagine someone knocks on your door, and you go to the door, and you say, who's there? And they say, I am who I am. You have not gained any information in that exchange, right? It's like God's just, I am who I am. So I progressed from this makes no sense at all to, it does make some sense, but it's totally unexpected. And by the time I'm done today, 2 weeks ago, I actually made it to the point where not only should it not be unexpected, it's the only answer God could possibly give. There is no other name that he could say here. So not only should it not have been confusing or unexpected, we should have expected it. So first off, understand, Moses is not just asking him, what is your name? Polysemy, the concept of a name in ancient times meant your essence. And what do I call you? It was both things blended together. It's what are you? Who are you at your core? What is your essence? And what do I say to describe that essence? So he's asking him both things. So God's answer is the verb to be. God's name is a verb. The verb to be is hayah in Hebrew. And so that's actually what God says. My name is to be. But strangely, how we translate it here, I am who I am, there is no word for that in Hebrew. So everything we know of as God's name is not what he actually said. There is no word for am, is, are in the first person. There is no first person form of the verb to be in Hebrew. This is not unique to Hebrew. Chinese, Russian, Arabic, they all are the same way. That if you're trying to say I am something, like I am a farmer, how we would say it in English, you just don't say am. It's completely unnecessary. You just say I farmer. I very tall. That's what you say. And so there is no present first person form of the verb to be. AA is the future first person form of to be. It means I will be. And so this can be translated, God's first name, the first polysemy, is there's 4 simultaneous translations that all mean something, that can give us clues to what he's trying to say, and they're all wrapped up in the same phrase. So the first one is, I am who I am. The second one is, I will be what I will be. The third one is, I am what I am. And the last one is, I will be what I will be. So the first polysemy that we see is that God's name itself, the first thing he says, AA Asher AA, means those 4 things simultaneously. So the I am what I am actually does help make a little more sense now if we understand it as I will be what I will be. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. You can't name me. You can't know my essence here and think that now you know what I have to do. I'm beyond that. I will be whatever I will be. I wrote what didn't I? Sorry. Who? And this is where you get a clue to the fact that Moses was fundamentally asking about his essence, okay? Your essence is who and what you are. So what is God? And who is God? It's not just how we would say, what's your name? And what God has says, I am who I am, I will be what I will be, and I will be who I will be, and I am what I am. So he's both what and is. And so if God fundamentally, his essence is the verb to be, what is he telling us? What does it mean? So the first thing he's telling us is fundamentally, like the guy at the door who said, I am who I am, God is telling Moses, first and foremost, you can't know. I am my own agent. I'm something you can't understand. I'll be who I will be. I can't give you words that you're going to understand. Imagine if he had said, I'm three persons in one, right? Like, I've been around for eternity. And Moses is like, what does eternity even mean? And God's like, well, time started at the Big Bang. He can't explain all these things, right? He gives us one sentence answer. I will be what I will be. We can't understand him. So the first part of God's name is his essence is not understandable. I will just be what I will be. And so therefore you have to read this book. God's name tells you, you don't know. You can't make up an idea of what you think God is and then go read the book and evaluate it in terms of what you think God was supposed to be, right? You have to learn what God is from the text. You have to watch what he's going to do to see what he will be. So that's the first part of this, is you can't know, you have to learn it from here. You have to see what I do in order to get an idea of who and what I am. So that's step number one. Step number two is God's essence. What's the one thing everybody wants to know? Does God exist? And what God has just told Moses is my essence is existence. That is what I am, and that is who I am. I exist, and that's the only thing you can fundamentally know about me, is that I exist. That's what his name means. And so you say, well, if his name means existence, I want you to picture if he had answered the way that you think he should have answered. You think he should have said, I am blank. His name. A Asher, what? No matter what you fill in the blank with, God becomes contingent on that thing existing. And God is not contingent on anything. That thing would have to exist first in order for God to exist. So, imagine he filled it in with what we would say, I am good. I am goodness. God is good. That's his name, goodness. Now goodness has to exist in order for God to exist. God becomes contingent on goodness, and if goodness exists, its opposite is at least possible. So evil exists. And so if God had said, I am goodness, he's fundamentally acceding that I am contingent on evil. Evil must exist for me to exist. There's actually no way that God could have answered this question other than I exist. My essence is existence. So that's why I say we shouldn't be seeing this as unexpected. We should be seeing this as the only thing he could possibly say. And it's the one thing we do want to know about him, right? He exists. When he goes to Pharaoh later and he says, you will know that I am Yahweh. You will know that I am the Lord. You will know that I exist. And that's where we get to understand, why does he kind of give us two names? He gives us Asher, and he also gives us Yahweh. Yahweh is almost identical to the third person male form of this verb. Yahweh means he is. That's what Yahweh means. And so what God has told Moses is he first explained his name. Asher, I am existence. I am, period, right? I exist. And then he says, go to the Israelites and say, he has sent me to you. The being whose essence is existence has sent me to you. So this was just conjugating the form to be that he originally did as I will be. But we do have a he is. We just don't have an I is, right? And so the he is Yahweh. So Yahweh is saying, he has sent me to you. So when he goes to Pharaoh and says, you will know that I am Yahweh. You will know that I am, he is. I am the one who exists. And that's what his name is all about. Now there is a common mistake, I think, among Western believers especially, that is along the lines of what I was coming up with before, that God gives us a commandment not to worship other gods. And what a lot of people do is they create a god in their own image and then they worship that god. And then they read this book and evaluate it from the god that they made up in their head. And that's actually because of God's name here, I am, or I will be, they are violating that commandment by making up that God instead of just learning what's in the text about him. Now coming up in Exodus 23:20, Yahweh is going to tell us that the angel who goes before Israel, he's going to tell them that my name is in him. And what that meant was my essence is in him, right? It's not just that you call him the same thing as me. It's that my name is in him. His essence is existence like me. This pillar of cloud and fire that you see is my name, is me, Yahweh. And so you have to listen to him. And he says, it says, "Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way, and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him." Now I want us to turn to John chapter 8, verse 48, to wrap up the name discussion.
John 8.
John 8:48, long chapter. So the Jews are arguing with Jesus here in this chapter. And so they say to him, verse 48, the Jews answered Jesus here, they answered him, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death." The Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets, and yet you say, 'Oh, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death.' Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be?" And Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." And so the Jews said to him, "You're not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" And Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." And so they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Why did they pick up stones to throw at him when he said, "I am"? Because he said, God's name is in me. I am. Now, what's really interesting is Jesus exploits polysemy. Greek has a word for I am versus I will be. Ego eimi means I am. In the sentence, he says Abraham, before Abraham was, past tense of to be. And he picks the present first tense, ego eimi, I am, as not just I was back then, I am now, and I am for all eternity. Like I am, I will be, and I was, all wrapped up in one. And so the reason they picked up stones to stone him was that he was claiming to be God, right? He's claiming to be the Yahweh who is introducing himself to Moses here. All right, so back to the text. Exodus. I'll go out on a limb. Does that make more sense now what God's name is? Existence. It's non-contingent existence. That's God's. All right, good. When I first had that explained to me, a light bulb went off in my head. All right, so where were we? We were at 18. And they will listen to your voice. So this is going to speak to the Israelites, right? They will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, "Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our Elohim. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go, unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. And after that he will let you go. I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. So you shall plunder the Egyptians." Would anybody have expected the creator of the universe to tell Moses that he has to say please to Pharaoh. He tells him to go to Pharaoh and say, please let us go for 3 days. Be polite. Be nice, Moses. But we do learn here that the plagues, all of this show, is completely a charade. God knows he's not going to let him go. That's how the story is going to work out. Moses should know this. And yet when he gets into the story, he forgets. He forgets that God said that he's not going to let him go. But Dennis Prager points out that that please carries a lot of weight with it. It carries an extremely important concept. That victims are not allowed, or being a victim does not absolve you from the requirements to love your enemies. Just because someone has hurt you does not mean you now have license to be unkind to them. Look at how he instructed them to act. Ask Pharaoh, please, go and ask your neighbor for the jewelry. Be nice to them. Be kind to them as they give you these things that you're going to take out. Just because someone hurts you does not mean you have the justification to be cruel back to them. But this gold, the gold that they're about to take, of course, Joseph earned all that gold for them 400 years ago, right? That's where a lot of this gold came from. But the very gold that God just promised them, what are they going to do with it? Not long after they get out of Egypt. They're going to build a golden calf out of it. The God who gave it to them, they're going to use it to build an image of another God. But later, a whole bunch more of it will be used to build the tabernacle. So it's, as in life, money can be good and money can be bad. It has both natures, right? All right, so back to Exodus 4. Then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, well, Yahweh did not appear to you. Yahweh said to him, well, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground. And it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But Yahweh said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. Now how do you catch a snake?
By the head.
You do not catch it by the tail. That's right. You catch it by the head. Moses just ran away from this snake. And God's like, just grab its tail. You'll be fine. You'll be fine, Moses. That is a test of Moses' faith. Grab the snake's tail. So he put out his hand and caught it. And it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, has appeared to you. Again, Yahweh said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And then Elohim said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, Elohim said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. So this question to me is just part of why I love the Torah. It is so real. Isn't this exactly what you would ask? But God, they're not going to believe me if I go out there. I can tell them, don't worry, God told me that once we're all on the mountain later, that will be our sign that he was speaking to me. No, he's like, they're going to need something. And God doesn't say, shut up, Moses, stop arguing with me. He says, all right, here's some signs. Right? So, what is the criteria under which we should believe someone who's working signs? Okay, if you see this today, Revelation tells us there will be people working signs in the end times that could even lead the elect astray, even lead us astray. And so the rule for what to believe is actually in Deuteronomy 13. So let's just flip over there real quick. So we'll compare what it says here with how Moses comes to the people to see if they should have believed him as well when he works signs. So Exodus 13. Deuteronomy 13. Sorry. Remember, Deuteronomy means retelling. It is Moses retelling everything we just read in the first few books afterward. Verse 1 of chapter 13. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice. And you shall serve him and hold fast to him. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has taught rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of slavery, to make you leave the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. And so you shall purge the evil from your midst. So even if someone shows up doing real miracles, like when the magicians in Pharaoh's court actually turn a staff into a snake, just like Moses did, you don't believe them if they're leading you away from God. The criteria for whether someone's miracles should affect you is, does it agree with this? Right? That's the criteria. Does it agree with what God has taught us about himself in here? Deuteronomy 18:21 does also, so we're not going to turn there, but it does also tell us the prophecy has to actually come true. It's not just an illusionist or somebody that makes like 50, the people on YouTube now, they make like 50 videos that could be all the outcomes, and then they post the one that actually happened. And they're like, see, I knew that this was going to happen. Or that one, who's that one guy, I forget his name, who like, he had these huge crowds. I think he was part of Bethel Church or something, and he would come up before the crowds and he'd pick someone out of the crowd and he'd tell them all about their family. Turned out beforehand, does anybody remember his name?
Sean Bowles.
Sean Bowles. Turned out beforehand he was looking up people that had bought tickets on Facebook to learn about who all their friends and everything were, and then he'd pick out their face in the crowd because he knew where they were sitting, and then he'd tell them all about these amazing things. And so that does not count. But if he had done it correctly, you still shouldn't have listened to him, because he was not preaching the actual true God. Alright, so back to, well, let's see, where are we at here?
One thing I noticed, I don't think I ever really caught before, is the 3 signs that he had Moses show him, the serpent, his hand, and the blood, is kind of what the plagues were. Because the plagues were creatures, the plagues were affliction, and then death.
Yeah, absolutely. They were
It's kind of a
precursor to
foretelling
it. Yeah.
of what the plagues were going to be.
You're exactly right. It was. It captured it all. And first, the staff into a snake. Imagine what that would actually take. Do you understand? We just treat it like we're watching a movie and we see some CGI and it just becomes a snake. I tried to get an AI to make me a good video of that. It can't do it. It flat out cannot do it. Because I think it's because it's unnatural. It's just the snake and the staff can't happen. But anyways, you imagine that. What really happened if it says his staff turned into a real snake? The tree dead cells full of DNA and proteins and cellulose. The DNA got rewritten. All the trillions of proteins and all the cells got like deconstructed, put back together in the order they needed, folded back in to do all the jobs they had to do to make muscle fibers and brain fibers and skin and everything. And it just happened like that. Like, that's the miracle that's going on here. Wood literally turned into living snake cells. That's amazing. And so the Hebrew word for snake, do you guys remember what this is? From Genesis in the Garden of Eden? Nahash. Yes, it's a Nahash. So what his staff actually became was a Nahash, a shining one, right? And we talked before about Nahash has a very deep polysemy, right? It's the snakes we know, but it's also the spiritual beings, especially the sons of God in the spirit realm, right? That's this Nahash. And we saw it first in Eden. We see it now with his staff. We'll see it again when the snakes out in the wilderness are biting the Hebrews and they're dying. And Moses creates a bronze Nahash, puts it up on a pole, and everybody that looks at the Nahash is instantly healed. And we talked before about how that makes no sense until you understand the story of Jesus. Jesus is a Nahash. He's one of these shining ones that gets put up on a pole, and anybody who looks to him, just has faith in him, will be saved. And so, that's what happens coming up. So Nahash have very important roles throughout our story. But there's one role I don't know if you guys fully appreciate. If you think in your head of a picture of Egyptian pharaohs, there's one part of all of them that I guarantee you overlooked. Whoa. Where did that just go? I thought I hit maximize, and instead it disappeared. I'll just drag it by hand. So here you go, one of the most famous ones. He's actually from the same 18th dynasty that we're in right now. King Tut. Let's zoom in on his headdress. You see that? You know what that is? It's a snake. It's a cobra. Now his headdress actually had a vulture beside it as well, because his dad Akhenaten tried to institute monotheism into Egypt by worshiping only the sun god Aken. And so he became called Akhenaten, and he reinstitutes all the original Egyptian gods. So he has not only the cobra, but also the vulture. And so this is King Tut, his headdress. Let's go look at Ahmose the First, the guy who kicked all the Canaanites out. You see this right here? That was a cobra. The next guy, Amenhotep the First. There you go. See the little coiled cobra on his head? Thutmose the First, the pharaoh who enslaved all the Egyptians, or all the Hebrews. This was a cobra on his head. Hatshepsut, remember the woman who was ruling as regent while Thutmose III grew up, right? You can barely see it. There's a little cobra sticking out of the front of her thing there. And then here's another one of both of them, Hatshepsut behind Thutmose III. Both of them have the little cobra on the front of their thing. Amenhotep II, same dynasty. They call this the blue crown, has this coiled thing on it. Thutmose IV, the same coiled thing. Amenhotep III, Akhenaten even, this guy who was King Tut's dad. The symbol of Pharaoh's power is the snake. He sits under the snake, and that's where his godhood derives from, is the snake. And the god that gives this power was called Wadjet. W-A-D-J-E-T, Wadjet. And so Pharaoh himself was not considered to have any authority unless he was wearing the cobra crown, in fact. He, as a man, did not have the authority of Pharaoh unless he was sitting under the snake. And so what we don't quite see in this story is that God has just taken the symbol of Pharaoh's power, the man who won't let them go, and he's going to enact a scene where a piece of wood becomes the snake that is his power. And in Moses' hand, Moses will control that snake by the tail, and it will become whatever he wants it to be. That's the first of the miracles or the plagues that goes on. And so when Aaron's the one who actually turns the staff into the Nahash in front of Pharaoh, when that eats the snakes of the other two magicians, I totally believe those magicians, Wadjet, turned those staffs into snakes. Because God says, I allow other things to do miracles to test you. Right? He told us other things are going to do miracles. So Wadjet turned those staffs into snakes. And when Moses' staff ate those snakes, Yahweh defeated Wadjet before the eyes of the Pharaoh who sat under the snake. So that's the first one. The second one, well, I'm not going to go to that. The hand, I think, is just the thing that would surprise you the most, right? Like, whoa, what happened? I imagine, like, all the little kids were coming up to Moses when he's showing all the people that, they're like, do it again, do it again. He sticks it in, they're like, oh, he sticks it in, it's better. But then he says, if they won't believe that, take some water from the Nile, pour it on dry ground, it'll turn into blood. Why would they believe that? Remember, we looked at the Google Earth picture a lot. What made Egypt distinctive? What was Egypt's lifeblood?
The Nile.
It's the Nile. It's that artery. All the gods. It was the gift of the gods. All the gods were tied to the Nile. Specifically, the goddess Hapi, H-A-P-I, was the goddess of the annual flooding that gave them all of their food. And he said, take the artery that flows through Egypt and pour it out on the ground, and they are going to see their own blood before their very eyes. This is pricking Egypt and bleeding it out on the ground right before their eyes. Now, why did he do it on the ground? Why didn't he just pick it up and then the cup it turns red? So that Moses couldn't have some blood powder up his sleeves, right? Once it pours it on the ground, Moses is gone. It has to be a miracle when you see it turn into blood. So we have two of the Egyptian gods attacked here. All the rest of the plagues, the frogs, the locusts, the flies, everything is an individual Egyptian god. Every one of them. And the first two are a direct attack on Pharaoh. All right, so then back to Exodus. So we were at verse 10, I think, right? Verse 10 of Exodus 4. But Moses said to Yahweh, "Oh, my Adonai," that one's in lowercase, Adonai. "Oh, my Adonai, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken with your servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue." And then the Lord said to him, "Well, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." And then the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Moses. And he said, "Well, is there not Aaron your brother the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as Elohim to him. And take in your hand this staff, with which you shall do the signs." Now remember, Moses is writing this. He's definitely an honest man. He could have left that part out. Where he's like, "God, I just didn't want to do this." His fourth question may have some merit, though. Of the three things that Moses did that we saw at the beginning, which was killing the Egyptian, speaking to the Hebrew to try to stop him torturing his brother, and standing up for the daughters of Jethro, the only one that didn't work was speaking. It's the one where he told the Hebrew not to do that, and he just kept doing it and said, "Who are you to be a judge over us?" Right? So maybe he's not great at speaking. But of course, God has told him, look, I mean, in the end, does speech win? Did it matter if he could speak well? No. It's God and the plagues that win. It's not whether he can speak well. And so I think we get to question number 5, the fifth question, the last one. This is the real one, right? He really just didn't want to do it. He's 80 years old. He's like, "God, look, when I was 40 and I killed the Egyptian, I was gung-ho. We could have done this then. I'm 80 now. I've been a shepherd for 40 years. Please just send somebody else." And all of us can understand Moses' feeling, but I don't know if any of us can understand feeling familiar enough with God to say that directly to him. "I just don't want to do it. Please send somebody else." And that is the only point where God gets angry at him. When God gets angry at us is when we quit struggling with him. We quit giving the excuses. We quit trying to figure out a way around it. We just give up and say, "I just don't want to do it." That's when God gets angry. But put yourself in God's shoes. Have you ever been trying to do something with someone who does nothing but make excuses, and you keep coming up with an answer to the problem that they raise, and they raise another problem, and then you give another answer, and they raise another problem, and you just get so frustrated. Like, you can definitely feel God's frustration dripping out of this story. Moses is clearly not brainstorming around his issues here, right? He's just trying to find ways to get out of doing this. And there's a perfect phrase from this. If you have never seen the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico, remember this movie quote, because you can use it when this happens to you in life. Johnny Depp says to the guy who is essentially just creating problems to make it so they won't go. And he's getting frustrated. And he says, "Are you a Mexican or a Mexicant?" And so since we live in America, you can say, "Are you an American or an Americant?" It is so frustrating when you're in that situation, though, isn't it? And that's where God is at. But God is super smart here. So I found it strange. It says that God got angry with Moses, but he didn't do anything to Moses. You expect after that to be like, and lightning came down from the sky and burned Moses to a crisp. It just says he got angry with Moses, and then he says, "Go get your brother." Because God is very smart. If I need Asher, my youngest son, to do something, I really need him to do it, I go get his older brother, Alex. And his older brother will watch over him like a hawk and make darn sure that he does the thing that I need him to do. And that's what God did. He said, "Go get your older brother then, and he is going to make sure that you go to Egypt and do what you're supposed to do." In the end, though, that does cause some long-term strife between the two. Putting the younger brother over the older brother ends up causing Aaron and Miriam to rebel against Moses later on, and there's a lot of bad blood that comes out of that. But what Moses is really saying here, I think, is, "Take this cup from me, God, please. I don't want to do this. It's the same thing Jesus said in the garden, except that Jesus ends it with, "Your will, not mine," and Moses doesn't. I think it's the same kind of a thing Moses or Jesus is feeling in the garden, just maybe not to the same intensity. But you do see Moses here as the opposite of Pharaoh, the man who does not want power. Pharaoh is the Ubermensch demigod sitting atop his bureaucracy of power. And Moses is, and he is the anti-Moses. Moses is the leader who doesn't want to be a leader, and that is usually the best leader, the guy who doesn't want the power. All right, I think we'll stop there for today.